All right, another episode. Mark Edwards back. I don't have my trusty co-host KV with me today, but you will love the person that we're talking to today. One of the hottest topics in the state of Arkansas. Teachers, Little Rock School District in particular, schools being taken over by the state. It is everywhere. And before we get started with Senator Joyce Elliott, first of all, let me introduce you. How you doing?
I'm doing quite well, thank you.
I have to put some disclaimers out there. I did invite Johnny Key to the show.
Oh, good.
Johnny Key, they wanted his communications people asked me to send them a list of questions.
Ahead of time?
Ahead of time.
Well, thank you for not sending me questions. I didn't need homework.
Exactly. I chose not to send them questions because I felt like it's a forum for you to come and discuss why you're doing it. And if you have no problem doing it in what you're trying to do, then you should be able to come on here and talk about it. I shouldn't have to send you questions.
That is exactly right.
It's a conversation.
If I don't know something, I'll say I don't know.
Right.
But it's probably not going to happen that if you ask my opinion, I'm not going to have an opinion.
Right. I can understand that.
Yes.
I can understand.
That's too bad.
Yeah. So I did invite him on. Also, Anika Whitfield. I've called her like 1,000 times.
Yeah.
Hadn't really been able to get in touch with her. But hey, we have you on the show.
Absolutely.
And we love you. Thank you for coming.
Oh, I'm glad to be here, Mark.
Okay. So first of all, for people who don't know, the Little Rock School District, there's so much going on with schools being taken over. So just talk to us briefly about what is actually going on.
Yeah, and this will. People might want to later on, if you see me somewhere, want to text me or whatever and ask me questions, you should do that. But what is happening is all the way back to when some of us probably remember something like No Child Left Behind under George Bush. And so a large part of that was to start something called accountability. And with Lakeview, the school districts were supposed to make sure they could prove that the kids who had been neglected, so to speak, were getting what they needed. So we came up with this accountability system where say if you were at Robinson High School, you couldn't just give some report about how everybody's doing at the school. You had to have something called subgroups. For example, African Americans would be a subgroup.
Right.
If you had disabilities, that's a subgroup. So, but we evolved. That was just to have information so you would know what to do. But we have evolved from that now into something called putting grades on schools. Actually putting a grade on a school, which, if it's you and me, probably, and I'm your teacher, I can probably give you a grade.
Right.
But what they're talking about now is like taking everybody in the class and put everything together about everybody, and that's the grade for the school.
Right.
Now, what does that do then for the person who is, say, making all A's or B's or whatever, and somebody else is making something that pulls your grade down?
There you go.
But the whole school gets that grade put on it. And when we did that, the legislators, I kept telling them, this is not fair. It's really not going to tell people what you think is telling them. Because if you are a person who is doing fantastically, nobody's ever going to know that if it's a low grade. So, but anyway, with all of the accountability stuff we had going on, and it was not just a Republican thing, but primarily, and I'm just saying that for information, not because I'm saying something bad about Republicans. So we started a movement, and this will be odd to people, but this started back in the 1950s. We had a group of people in the country who don't believe in public schools. They think all schools should be privatized. And that blows my mind too. So people have gotten together, people with lots of money, like the Walton Foundation right here in Arkansas is one of the major players. Well, they've gotten involved in public schools in that they are where there are a lot of black and brown students. We don't tend to do this now in places where there are not a lot of black and brown students. Like you come into Little Rock, and whether or not we want a charter school in our neighborhood, they just decide, well, we're going to go in and we're going to hire some people and we're going to put up a charter school because all these kids need choice. And especially if there's a school that's had an F put on it or a D put on it. But what I want people to understand, go back to that example I just gave about the class. So when you see an F on a school, you don't necessarily know what's really going on in that school.
Right.
That's the problem with it.
Right.
And so one of the things people did was, in order to privatize schools, you have to undermine the public schools. That means make them look bad. And this is one of the ways that's being used
Make them
to
look
do
bad.
that.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And the method we use to do that is also not sound, because basically what it does is it measures income and poverty and disadvantage more than it measures anything else. You can predict, when the students take the test, you can practically predict where there are going to be schools that look like they are failing schools, although there may be lots of things going on inside that school that are great, because the only tests that are considered are the ones you take on English language arts or English and math.
Right.
Now, didn't you have some other classes when you were in school?
I had other classes. Yes.
Yeah. But nobody would ever know about that. And that's the unfairness in it. So what we should be doing with testing, I'm not against testing, but we ought not to be using it to shame and to punish kids, because it's like we're punishing kids for something somebody else didn't do by putting an F on their school. So what should happen is we should take information and say, like, if Mark has made an F on something, rather than publicly putting a big F in front of your head and you got to walk down the hallway with an F on you, because that's how students feel. They will tell you, well, I'm in an F school and this is really harmful to kids. But that's the short version of what's happening, other than people need to know. This is a thing I want them to keep inside their heads. This is deliberate. This is on purpose, because there's money to be made.
Right. And on that note,
money to be made.
And on that note,
Yes.
I was going to ask you,
Yeah.
because charter schools it's a business. It's about money.
Oh, it's absolutely a business. Yes.
So when you take students that you can hand pick
Yeah.
and get paid for, that actually takes money away from public schools.
That's exactly right. And people will say, the charter school people, so I'll try to be fair to them, they would say, we don't hand pick them. No, you don't just go in and say, I'm going to take Mark, I'm going to take David and all that. That's not exactly what you do. But nobody really knows for sure, because what we say is it's a random drawing, but there's no observation of that random drawing.
Right.
And the kids, and they say, we're here because all these kids, they don't need to be trapped inside of a failing school, where you've made it possible to say the school is failing. And then we don't need to make Mark go there, but, we have a deal for you over here at a charter school. So the people they get are the ones where their parents may be motivated to take them some other place, and they may be recruited to come to that school, just like some of the private schools, recruit athletes and that kind of. Well, I shouldn't say that. They say they don't, but I know they do. I'm not stupid. I was in the education business way too long.
I'm glad you pointed that out. I'm glad you pointed that out.
So people can identify with that. They can kind of identify with this. So when you get these kids. You may or may not be getting teachers who are certified. You may or may not have counselors. They have a gazillion waivers for things they don't have to do. There's not athletics, that kind of thing. But if I'm, say, the Walton Family Foundation, I'll just use that. They don't like it that I talk about them, but I'm not saying anything that's not true, so I can say what I want to.
Right.
So the foundation comes in. We passed a law to say that the school districts had the ability, if a school is underutilized, all that means is they don't have enough kids in them from somebody's perspective. Take Franklin, for example.
Franklin Elementary.
Franklin Elementary. Long been a staple in the neighborhood.
Right.
So kids were deliberately, for about 2 years before the school closed, kids were routed to other schools, and so the population went down. And so when the population went down, they started looking at, we're going to close schools who don't have enough kids in them. Well, Franklin was one of them. In the meantime, we had passed a law that said if a school is not used, that is, there are no kids in it, and it's underutilized, if a charter company wants to buy that school, the charter school would have first dibs on buying that school, even if you wanted to pay more money for it. The charter schools would get it. So let's say I buy that school.
Right.
Now I can lease that school to the people who want to come in and have a charter.
But not the people who live in their neighborhood.
No. If I live in the neighborhood, and I do, if I wanted to buy that school, and say the Waltons wanted to buy that school, and they said they're going to put a charter school in it, and I said, well, I'm going to make it a neighborhood. I'm going to make it a neighborhood something, like a community center. They would get that school even if I was offering more money for it. We put that in the law.
Gotcha.
So when you do that, and then they hire somebody to come in to run the school. Well, those people will bring in their administration usually. They have to be paid. The other thing they will do is bring in their own curriculum. Guess what? You got to buy that curriculum from them, and then they can make their salaries as they want to. They don't have open school board meetings. And if the Walton Foundation wants to make a big contribution to them so they can do other things,
which they will, because they can write it off for taxes.
That's exactly right. They can write off taxes, I think now up to 39%.
Wow.
So it's a sweet deal.
Sweet.
Yeah. In fact, Jim Walton, I think it was 2014, actually convened a meeting of a whole bunch of hedge funders and other people like them with a whole bunch of money to explain to them how they could make money in the charter school business. It's a money-making business. And it's not to say that somewhere there aren't some decent charter schools. I'm not saying that, but people don't need to be mixed up thinking that these schools just failed. This is just a bad school. So we just up and close it for those poor kids, and now they can go to a charter school. All that stuff is deliberate.
Yeah, and not to mention that when you're going there, it's no longer. It doesn't seem like it's no longer about the kids.
Yeah,
seems like it's more about the bottom line, the bucks.
Well, because when you are in something to make money, the way that you will make money is you have to cut costs and personnel. In this case, would be the kids and the teachers. That's the biggest cuts, because your purpose is to make money. Like if you think about the private prison system, for example, one of the reasons they almost always end up in trouble is because they don't spend enough money per person to have decent prisons, because they've got to make money. They have shareholders and stuff. So that's a lot of what's happening.
Man, I was just curious, who is profiting off of these charter schools, and also, I mean, how does that even work? Are they just like investments? Or
There's
shareholders.
There's an investment, and then there's also the tax issue. Say you're the person who owns the building, and you rent it to me. Then you're going to get enough money back over time to pay for that building and then begin to make money. To make money. The other way that people, that they're, especially hedge fund managers, they may or may not own the building, but they love that tax break that can be up to 39%. and it's
almost half.
I mean, just think about that.
Yes.
And connect that to all the other tax breaks they figure out a way to make. And then we have people who are test writers and curriculum writers. Some of those are the same folks, and then they sell that to the charter schools as well.
You know what else? I'm because I did some research and I found out another reason why it's an advantage for the state is because right now the state is spending somewhere close to almost $300 for insurance for the teachers. Because the union got it where they could spend something for the teachers, because teachers don't make a lot of money.
Right, that's right.
So now if you go to a charter school, that's money that the state doesn't have to pay.
Yeah. And if you are, say, at a public school, you're going to have much better benefits, because in this case, and a lot of that was because of the union, but one of the other things that's attractive for charter schools is a way, because these very same people hate unions, it's also a way to bust unions as well. Because, see, you need to get all of the distractions out of the way to be able to make it a company as opposed to a state-run organization. And I'm not saying any of this to say we don't need to make some big improvements in our public schools. We do. But you think about it this way: rather than spending your time creating something over here that is
just fix what you have.
Yeah, that just fix what you have. I said it's kind of like somebody saying, okay, my house, I have a hole in my roof. I think I'll go buy me a new house with the same money and keep paying for both. Yeah. It doesn't make any sense, because we don't have enough money to keep on having other schools. We really need to be making sure we're doing better by everybody. Because, Mark, I taught school for a long time. I love teaching. Nothing makes me happier than seeing a student get a great education. And when I see how much we're scattering our resources right now, it's almost as if, we're going to guarantee something no better than mediocrity. And that's not fair.
Okay, so I got a two-part question here. One, since the school is failing right now, so we've given these schools a big F or a D. The schools are failing. So the state comes in, state's taking over control, which, by the way, from what I hear, most of the state-run schools are failing.
That is
So
exactly right.
it's an incentive for the state to fail these schools
Yes.
so that they can sell them out to the charter schools.
You are getting the picture.
So they can sell them out to the
Yes.
charter schools.
Yes.
So it's a two-part question.
Uh-huh.
What is the charter school going to do different? How are they going to keep the kids from getting an F? Number one. But let's just answer that one first.
Okay. Well, if you start with that, we had a charter school right here in Little Rock that had Fs for years that never was closed until it finally got to a point where it was obvious there was some money that was being mismanaged. And by the way, daily we see something like that across the country. And I want to just point out right here, I am very aware people think this sounds like some kind of crazy conspiracy thing. But I promise you, I'm not saying a thing I can't back up. And because it took me years studying this to know it. So I get it if people are thinking that way, but I'm just telling you, catch on.
So for the public schools, the second part of the question. So for the public schools who whether let's take the Franklin School for instance, it's now closed down.
It's closed.
But if you give Franklin more support, because a lot of these charter schools probably aren't going to be sitting where Franklin is. It's probably going to be moved somewhere else, which is going to make it hard for the children in that community to get to.
Yeah.
And you'd have single moms, people not be able to get there. So if you move that school, you'll make it hard for the kids. What are you doing for the kids in that neighborhood?
Yeah, then you just shift them over to another school when they have
Another failing school?
Yeah, in this case, I don't think it was another school that. And by the way, I always say these are the schools that have been failed because, and I'll get back to that in a minute. But what happens is, like for example, Franklin was closed. Wilson was closed but reopened as a school that's supposed to be. For kids who are having issues, like the alternative learning schools. And then Woodruff School was closed, and Southwest was closed. And it was because they were, quote unquote, underutilized. But at the same time, we were closing those schools. We closed 3 schools. We have opened 3 charter schools after we closed those schools. And those charter schools don't have even the number of kids in them that were in the schools that were closed.
So they're underutilized as
They
well.
are absolutely. So exactly, you are getting it. So people can understand. Saying that something is underutilized is not. The point of that is to close it so you can open up something else, and many times you can buy that very building and put a charter school in there. And I want to be sure people understand, because how is it that the schools were taken over in the first place? Because I don't think this will take long. There were 48 schools.
You got all the time you need.
All right, good deal. So there are 48 schools in the Little Rock School District when this started happening. 6 of the 48 schools were the ones that had been labeled F. 6 out of 48.
6 out of 48.
When was this?
This was 2015.
Okay.
6 out of 48. And so if you do the math, that's about 88% of the schools are not labeled F.
Right.
So in situations like that, what they could have done, they could have just given some intensive support to those 6 schools.
Right.
There was no reason, there's nothing in the law that said you had to take over those schools. But people are going to have to follow me on this. Where there are a lot of black and brown kids, the bet is we can come in and do this song and dance because it's a good campaign. They have the money to have a great campaign. Oh, these poor black and brown kids, they deserve to have great schools like anybody else. Who said that they didn't? Okay, but it sounds good, so here we are to be your savior. Right. Rather than help the schools that they're already in. And so 6 out of 8 schools, they could have worked with the 6. But no, this is the largest school district in the state at that time. It's not anymore. At that time. So this is where the most money is, because you get money per kid. So they took the entire school district because of 6 schools. Right. Now, in nobody's mind.
That makes sense.
That doesn't make no.
Nowhere.
And that's why I keep telling people, I know you think this is crazy, because it is crazy. But 6 out of 48, so they took over the school district, and we thought they wouldn't. We thought they would deal with the 6. That would make sense. And then they decided that not only we're going to take the school, because this is in the law to allow people to do this, and then they decided, and we're going to get rid of the school board as well. So they removed the school board and just put Johnny Key, who is the commissioner, Johnny Key can make decisions for the entire school.
Mm-hmm.
We are now in the 5th year of the district being taken over by the state.
So it's time to relinquish.
Somebody needs, if we're going to go around putting F's on things,
Mm-hmm.
somebody needs to go over to the Department of Education and put an F on it.
Mm-hmm.
Because when they started out, there were 6 schools. Now there are 8.
Wow.
8. And they're not even the same schools.
And they're still failing under state control.
What have they
for 5
done?
years.
What have they done, like, when they had them under control? Like, what's different versus, the past?
You mean to be helpful?
Yeah,
Right,
because you assume if you're going to take it over,
They took it
you're
over.
going to
What
fix it.
Right.
What they changed?
This was part of the problem. They brought in, they got rid of the superintendent too. So I'll just tell you administratively first what they did. They just brought in a superintendent, didn't talk. You don't hire superintendents like this. You do an interview and blah, blah, blah and all that. They brought in a superintendent and just said.
And they being Johnny Key.
That'd be Johnny Key.
Okay.
But now, to be fair, I'm sure it's not just Johnny Key. It's Walter Hussman. It's the Waltons. And the governor. This is who they wanted.
Wow.
Just brought him in and said, this is your superintendent. We'd never even met him before. I knew who he was only because we were friends on Twitter. But so anyway, so we did that. And then because they had gotten rid of the school board, they appointed, we had 7 zones. We still have 7 zones for school board. So they said, legislators, give us recommendations for each one of these zones. And then from those zones, Johnny Key was to choose somebody to recommend to the state board, and they generally just do. So the way that worked, those 7 zones, I recommended somebody, I think, for 6 out of the 7 zones.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't expect all 6 of mine to get appointed, but not a single one
Was appointed.
Not one. But here's who was appointed. Out of those 7 people, 6 of them was accepted only if they had been appointed by a Republican legislator. I still have that list.
Wow.
Only one person was appointed, and that's Jeff Wood, who's the chair, who did not have a Republican legislator appoint them. And those legislators, they were either appointed by Andy Davis or Jeremy Hutchinson. Those are the 2. Now, there's something wrong with that. So when I say things like this has been something done more under Republicans than anybody else, and this is part of their agenda around the country. If you look at Detroit, you look at Camden, New Jersey, Newark, New Jersey, Atlanta, Houston, name a big city school district. So they did that for administrative purposes. And after that, we couldn't figure out what they were doing because they would have somebody come every quarter and talk about how things are going more so than what they're doing. And
come to the state, is that?
Come to the State Board of Education
Right.
and make their report. And so when we were getting up to close to the 5 years, then we start getting antsy because they were supposed to have told the school district, told the people, what is it you have to do? What do you need to be doing to be prepared to get out of state control? And we got, the district got the criteria that they were going to have to follow to get out of state control on February 19th of this year, in the 5th year. And then by the time they took the tests, say like in April and May, you had about that much time to figure out if you could meet that. And this because they just had not, they were just doing what they came to do. They had been busy closing schools. They'd been busy opening charter schools. And they'd been busy moving people around. They moved some people around in the district. But there was not anything I could really put my finger on and say, these are all the things they did differently. I'm not saying they didn't because I wasn't there every day,
right.
But it was nothing that was evident.
Okay, so let me ask you a question because I'm sitting here jotting down and just
all kind of
putting some things together.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out the connection. Yeah. So big money, aka Waltons, big money, reaches down to representatives and says, you know what we really need? Charter schools down there. Representatives make sure we can open up a pathway for charter schools. How do you do that? Is you get school districts taken over, i.e. Pine Bluff has been taken over. Pine Bluff High School is definitely now. And when what happens
and
is...
who was in Pine Bluff School? I'm telling you, you can follow the pattern. I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pine Bluff has been taken over, almost all black.
Right.
Dalloway has been taken over, I think probably all black.
Pretty much.
Earl has been taken over,
Definitely.
black.
Definitely.
Mariana has been taken over, black.
Right.
West Helena has been taken over, black.
So they're all currently controlled by the state?
What now?
Every school you just mentioned is currently
all those school districts.
Yeah, every one of those school districts except West Helena, they have been in and out, and they're in a position now they're probably going to be back in again.
So let me ask you this, so just so I know.
Uh-huh.
So when the state takes over the school districts, now the money that these public schools are getting, you can slide a charter school in there.
Yeah, you can.
These charter schools can now get some of that money, take it away from the state. State don't have any public schools there now. The charter schools exist, and when those charter schools exist, more money flows back to the big money people.
Back to the big money people. And so on the way, after their charter schools, then it becomes easy to privatize it totally. And what privatize means totally, you're still going to be using the state money, but it's just like
now I'm
your
going to be able to
501(c) or whatever, you just get state money and it's private.
And I'm going to be able to determine which kids come in here and which
because you're going to have all kind of things you can do. Yes.
Because if I'm a charter school and this school is failing, I'm probably not going to take all the kids that are failing. I'll probably take some of the kids that aren't failing that can do the work.
Yeah, because part of the beauty and the reason for the public schools, not originally, but as we realized we needed to have everybody educated, was that you may not turn away anybody. That was part of the beauty of the. So now and we're in our 5th year, been taken over for the 5th year, and we just got the scores. And there are now 8 schools that are in this category instead of a 6, and it's a different 8.
So then the state should get that F now because they're screwing up.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
But what is the state
But
doing?
who's in control of the state? Who's over the state that says cannot the legislatures do something?
Yeah, no, they could, but the legislatures are the one who put this in place so that this could happen.
Right.
That's
Gotcha.
the thing.
Gotcha.
Which I voted against. I kept. I kept saying this is too much power. And when the person said, "Look, this can happen. This can happen. This is just too much power," and we got the bill that is allows so much of what's happening now. It's a bill. There's about 60-something pages, and we got it a few days, maybe like a Friday or something. I'm not positive it was a Friday, but a few days where I knew there's no way people are going to sit down and read this bill. And I sat down and read the whole thing that weekend. I had 17 questions that I needed to have answered.
Yeah.
17. I got to ask 3. And somebody made a motion to say, do pass, and we passed it. So if people want to keep on having this kind of thing happening, and don't think it's not going to come to your school sooner or later, because we're going to run out of black and brown kids in this state. They're not as many as people think. You know, like black people are only about 16% of this state. And a lot of people think there are a lot of us, especially because we live in Little Rock, but no, that's not true.
Right.
Now, Springdale, I predict, will be the first one up in Northwest Arkansas because there are a lot of kids
Hispanic?
there. Yes.
Hispanic kids.
Yeah, and that's
Rogers would be in that category
as well.
That's
why I say black and brown.
Right.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead and ask.
I was just curious who does the rating agency for the schools.
Yeah. Well, the Department of Education hired, I think her name is, I know her last name is Areola, Dr. Denise, I think Areola, and asked her to come up with a method that should be included, a way to do it. But in the legislation that was passed, we put some things in there that you can have things in there such as, if it's a high school, what's your graduation rate? What's maybe the attendance? And there was something else, some other things you can consider. And so there may be less of a leaning on that test score, but it still is predominant in the upper grades. But if you're in elementary school, it's less likely that it's not going to be.
Yeah, you're not dropping out at third grade.
Right. Yeah. But now, so we didn't know what all we were going to have to do until February 19th, and between February 19th and the end of school. How are you going to do something that was just handed to you? You know, even if you could. But,
so I'm sitting here thinking, here's some other questions I have. the union now for the public school teachers will go away. Insurance for public school teachers could possibly go away as well.
It could possibly not so much go away, but it could be
reduced,
cut even more.
Right.
Yeah. Because what people need to know about the union is these same people are very, very anti-union, very anti-union. And Walter Hussman, who owns the Democrat Gazette, has wanted the union gone for years. And he's one of the ones that has the power and has people's ear.
Wow.
So, and so since the district took over the school district, the part of the taking over was to do things such as what you see happening now. Close schools, move these over here, get the charter schools in, and get rid of the union. All of that was important. The other thing they did, they took away, in most places, you have a right to something called due process if you're going to be fired, especially in public. And that might not be as much in a
because it's hard to get rid of teachers and coaches in high school.
Yeah. It's hard, but it's hard for a reason, and that's because the administration hasn't done its job. Because it ought to be difficult to just fire somebody, but I'm telling you, a lot of teachers can be fired if you were doing your job.
Right.
It's just easier to go like, okay, you did fine, and go on.
Right.
So that's the problem there. But so what the state board and decided to do, we've taken you over so we can do what you want. So they just said, we're just going to take away fair dismissal from teachers. We're just going to take away due process.
Now
it was, and then wait a minute, and so that was so awful.
Wow,
that was so awful. At first, they said they were going to take it away just from the teachers who were in the schools that were labeled F. And then I said to the board,
you're going to do the whole thing.
Who wouldn't think of that?
Right.
And I said, this sounds like something back to the bad old days where some people get treated this way and some get treated that way. But that was an actual motion. And so, and when they came back and made the motion that they were going to take away the union, okay, we'll give you back fair dismissal. Just like we're just playing with teachers' emotions, but not just their emotions, with their livelihood.
Wow.
That actually happened. But go ahead with your question.
Well, because I was going to say, because once you get rid of the union, now you can have, from what I understand, they're having personal policy committees. And the personal policy committees can come in and they can make recommendations.
That's right.
Doesn't necessarily mean you have to.
That's right. And it can be changed when they get ready for it to change as well.
Right.
Because I said, I call it a glorified discussion is what you're going to have, and we'll just put some of this on paper. But the difference it's the difference between collective bargaining and collective begging, because that's kind of what you're reduced to. And in the South, we just kind of have this anti-union thing. But what people don't, even if you work in a factory, you're not forced to join the union, and you can join if you want to. But even if you don't join the union, you get the benefit of what everybody else paid to make happen.
Right.
And so this is how all this went down. Number one, they want to get rid of the unions, period. But here's the other thing people need to know. The Walton Foundation has helped set up a whole collective that is designed to undermine this public school thing. They have hired a person to be the voice, and what he says on this Arkansas Learns, Gary Newton, on the website, we are here to be the voice of business, blah, 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 blah. Well, who is business? They sure don't like unions now, do they?
Right.
Yeah, and what is charter school? That's business. So we've got that person who's set up to do that. Then we have something called the Reform Alliance. This is all Walton-supported money. The Reform Alliance. And the point of this group is to make sure that when you undermine these schools, these are the people who come in, swoop in to say, oh, now, don't you want a charter school?
Yeah. Because they can dress it up and make it look really nice.
Absolutely. You've got the money. You can sell anything, basically.
Exactly.
Then they support and have helped set up something called the Arkansas Public Resource Center. This is an outfit that will, if I say I want a charter school but I don't know what to do, they are there with lawyers, and they're a whole outfit.
They'll take it over. They'll tell you exactly what you need.
That's right. That's exactly right. And they will do the application for you. They do the whole thing. And then they have, this other thing that's called it's kind of it doesn't have the Walton name on it, but it's like the company that buys these buildings and whatnot. But the Walton, it's called KSG or something like that. And people see that, they won't know that's Walton money. You don't have a way of knowing that unless you know.
Because I don't want you to know what I'm doing.
I don't have you don't have any way of knowing that. And then there's more. They gave a grant of about $346,000, I think it was, because they hate unions, but they would be okay if you have a nice little sweet lady association over here.
Yeah, personal policies committee.
Yeah, no, this is another thing because they don't like the union. They actually helped set up this little association called the Arkansas State Teachers Association. They go and talk against unions. They go and talk for the charter schools. And these are teachers. Wow. Money is strong. So you can see there is a whole collective here. And when people think I'm just making it up and that is not on purpose, you don't set up all that if you're not being purposeful.
Now, here's what's ironic. Yeah. We're talking about state schools, state funded, all this, not one mention of how any of this is going to help the kids.
That's right.
When are we going to get to the point where we're helping the kids?
That's right.
Because we're in failing schools. So when do we help the kids?
That's right. Because if we say a school is failing, that seems to me, because I've been trying for years to talk to us about, let's have something called community schools, and it doesn't mean a school that's just in the community. It means a school that has wraparound services for kids and ways of helping the parents who maybe need to be educated. And then you work with people in the community, the business community, if they want to be helpful. Let's hire some of these parents at a living wage so they don't have to work 2 jobs and not know what their kids are doing after school.
Right.
Because the thing of it is, if you find a high-performing community, you will find a high-performing school.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So that's why community schools make sense. But we have not been able to get to that, because to have community schools right away would mean probably all these schools wouldn't have been failing schools. And so now we're talking about it more because, we've done a lot of what we want to do. And it's been all over the country. When we have community schools, kids are doing better. And in the community school model, you also start thinking about how can you make the community better.
Right.
Because if it's going to be sustainable, like for my kid or your kid, they didn't have to worry about where they're going to sleep tonight. They didn't have to worry about if somebody's going to beat my mom up tonight. Right. They didn't have to worry about whether I'm going to see you in 2 or 3 days, because when you come in, I'm out, whatever. They didn't have to worry about, for the most part, I can't even walk outside my door. And this is trauma for kids.
Right.
And so these things matter when you come into the classroom. And I keep telling people, they keep saying, we give them all this money. Well, money is not the thing that's going to change unless we are addressing the real issues.
Because you can't hug a dollar bill.
That's right. And so when people say, well, what do they need? Okay, what does your neighborhood look like? What is your community? Okay, that's what we need. Yeah. And then, well, how are we ever going to do that? Well, one of the reasons the neighborhood looks the way they do has been done on purpose. If people won't loan you money to buy a decent house, except in certain neighborhoods, if we continue to have realtors who keep encouraging people don't move to this neighborhood because it's a bad neighborhood, whether they know it or not. And realtors, by the way, are using those grades saying, oh, you can't move with that. That's an F school. And they don't know what the hell they're talking about because they don't understand. First of all, if you have an A on a school, you still don't know what you're talking about. Because
and it's still graded the same way as the F schools.
That is exactly right. That's why I keep trying to make people understand. On the one hand, they think, oh, man, this is great. This school's an F. I know not to send my kid there because that's what the method says. But if I say to them, well, the same method was used to put an A on your school or a B, and it's a poor method, how do you know it's an A or a B? Because there's something we have at the legislature called the Legislative Bureau of Research, and they work independently. They're not beholden to anybody. And so when they did an analysis of the way the schools are labeled, what they showed clearly was if you were, say, looking for a school that had the best reading program in the city, you might miss it because it might have a C on it, and you don't want your kid going to a C school. Because you can actually have an A school, and your reading might not be as good as, for example, of that school that's just into the C category.
Right.
And you would never know that because the school is this one over here. Your child really needs reading. That one has an A, but it really, their reading is a C. This C over here might have reading almost up to an A or a B.
How much of that is test taking? I know for me, test
yeah.
taking was. I always thought anytime it was a test, you're trying to trick me.
That's right. It's overwhelmingly. There's these other things that I mentioned earlier that can be in it, but the preponderance of the decision making is on the testing, and that's one day out of a year that you take this test, but you may take it over a 4-day period for math and for English, and now I think they're starting to do it with science as well. But it has an outsized impact on how your school gets labeled and how your school gets treated.
Wow.
And if you are a school district with 48 schools, the chances you might get a school that's maybe labeled out of 48.
See?
You might. And you might even get 2 or 3 if you get that. But number one, what you need to remember that the way it got there is suspicious. And that's clearly shown, by people who are statisticians. And number 2 is you don't take over the whole district to help them, because now you're supposedly running a whole district
when you really just need to run that school.
Yeah,
right.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so now moving forward, we've identified the problem.
Yeah, moving forward.
So now moving forward, how can communities help? We talked about that. How can communities actually come in and help this situation to prevent this?
Yeah. Number one, we're going to end up losing a lot of teachers unless we do something about this union thing, because they can go other places. And there's no reason teachers or any adults should be treated the way we're treated. I would invite people to take a look at what was passed at the last board meeting. Was that we were not going to treat them differently, because we were going to have the schools that were labeled F have one. They were going to be under the state, and they were going to let the rest of the schools go, and then we'd have 2 different things.
Resegregation, almost.
That's exactly what we were talking about.
Resegregation.
And it's just on A, B, C, D, or F. So that would create such a muck over that. They backed off that. And so now what's going on is they're out there, and you can find it, in the news, on newspapers anyway. But the city, that's when the mayor got involved. The city, the Arkansas Department of Education, and Little Rock School District, the 3 of them are to work together to come up with a memo about a partnership, about how everybody should be working together.
Right. And
they left out the community in that discussion, which we're trying to get them to include now, because that makes no sense. Well, this is a logical, good way to go. Actually, if you include people, but they left out right now. I mean, it's just like they've gotten together and put these things down. It's a draft, and we're going to have time to talk on that. But the idea of community partnership is a good idea.
Right.
But what's in that draft right now is even more controlled by the state, even more. It's like you and I have a partnership, but not really. I get to call all the shots. It's like, in a marriage, the woman should call all the shots. That kind of thing.
Wait, were you sliding that in?
I was just checking to see if you were listening.
Yeah, I'm listening. Especially when you say that. Yeah,
I was just checking. But at any rate, so we're at that point now. What the community can do, if the community wants, for example, to make sure we have community schools that are led by the community, because they're supposed to be. That's why it's that way. Have meaningful contact, a meaningful part in setting them up, because it really is going to be important to the community to be a part of it. They can come out and support, the idea of having community schools when they're called, when we get the community schools, and I feel comfortable that we will. What they need to do, people have time, like if you're retired or if you want to come to night things, we need lots and lots of volunteers to help our kids who don't have, a mother or father figure or whatever. But even when they do, We need people coming into the schools. For example, one of the things I would envision, I want to see every child have a world-class education, world-class, not something that's adequate or okay.
Right.
So if we have, for example, academics are important, but I think every child ought to have an opportunity to be involved in some extracurricular activity, because some extracurricular activity. Because that keeps kids involved and connected.
I was just going to say,
Yeah.
what about incentive programs
Yeah.
for those schools to get the motivation there?
Yes, we need those kind of things, because a student is more than just a book or academics. It's
Right.
important. And so there are people in the community who have all kind of skills. Somebody might know archery, for example. Well, I would like to have, when you have all your classes you can take, I'd like to have the same thing for the extracurricular. You choose your academics and you choose your extracurricular. And some kids may be working and may not, but they are involved in something.
Right.
And the whole point is to keep people involved, keep them happy. School should be a joyful place. It shouldn't be dreadful. And one of the ways that you inject joy in it is having those extracurricular things. And then I would surely like to see schools where our focus is on teaching, not testing. And teaching, not testing. Because right now it's all about testing. And it really does take all the joy out of the schools. Teaching, not testing. And we need something called restorative justice in our schools, a way of disciplining kids. Because the kids have issues and they come to school and they are already all tanked up and angry and everything and not wanting to do what you say or whatever. Well, number one, if I'm the teacher, I need to think about, okay, well, I need to learn some more. Teachers need time. I need to learn some more about Mark. What is Mark like? And that kind of thing.
And when you got 30, 40 students, it's kind of hard for that
really hard.
control.
It is hard. And then when teachers don't have time to sit down and think about, now, Mark really likes cricket. I didn't even know he knew about cricket. And then I can start constructing lesson plans that have something to do about cricket or whatever.
Right.
And I go like, Mark, I know. And I can come into class that day and make you the absolute star of the class. Because I can deliberately have something written in a lesson plan and use cricket as an example. And everybody's going to go, what's cricket? And the people are going to look around and go, I don't know, but I know Mark knows.
Yeah.
Now, Mark maybe hadn't said anything in class because I hate this class, but all of a sudden Mark's a star because nobody knows anything.
Right.
Teachers need time to think about in those students, like in those kind of ways. I think when we start focusing on education, not on testing, that leaves us freed up to be more creative and thoughtful about students and how to engage students. Who wants to be drilled? And that's so much of what it's become because of the testing. And some other things that could happen, we were able to get, we know, especially for little kids, they need lots of recess. They need lots of time to learn freely. And we've just almost, because of testing, we've just almost taken away recess.
My sister-in-law, but I won't say her name, but my sister-in-law is in the public school system. And one of the things she says is first grade kids, I want to say if it's first grade or kindergarten kids, should not be picking up a pencil.
No.
At all.
She's right.
Anybody at that level with kids picking up a pencil in first grade.
It's crazy.
Elementary.
And what we're doing, when you hear people say things, this is anti-child, and the people don't realize it. They'll say, well, first grade has become the new second grade. That's crazy. The kid hasn't become a new kid.
No, you still got to develop.
No, you still got to develop. And so I have studied high-performing countries all over this world. That's my dream for our kids. World-class schools Finland, for example. A lot of people know about Finland and how great they do, but there are some others as well. But in Finland, kids, because they believe so much in kids ought to play, their thing is kids have a right to play. But they know if you let kids play, you're learning things all the time. I mean, think about, I'm a lot older than you are, but I think you probably were in a period where you got a chance to have recess.
I did.
I did, yeah. And think about when you were at home. I grew up in the country, and we were outside doing something. I figured out how to climb a tree when I was, little. But it's because I was out there just figuring it out for myself.
Yeah, we didn't have a lot of the video
learning.
games. We didn't have a lot of the smartphones. We didn't have a lot of that.
And so in Finland, kids don't even start school until they're 7 years old. They don't even start until they're 7. But because they think the kids, and they are doing fantastically. they don't bother with all of this testing and stuff. What they do is concentrate on hiring very good teachers. And if they are not wonderful teachers, then they have a responsibility. You're going to turn into a great teacher here, or you're not going to be here. And most of them, and people think that leads to a lot of firing, but it doesn't. Because they are developing teachers as well as everything else. So the kids come in, they're 7 years old, and they're starting school. And we would be like, oh, that's abuse. We would go crazy. But what they do in the meantime, we were talking about where there is a community that's doing well. You tend to have schools that are doing well.
Right.
What they do is they invest in their kids from the time they are born. The main thing these schools who are high performing in this world, the main thing they do first and foremost is every child must have an equitable education. And they figure you can't get to that equity unless you're starting way back. And in Finland, it starts with a visit to the hospital. They get something called the box with all the things you need in it to get started when you get home, and somebody will visit and make sure you know how to use it. They come visit you in the hospital, and then sometimes visit home if somebody's having problems. But if you think about it, they've invested in their kids to where they are developing all along. So it's no big deal when they show up and they don't
At 7.
At 7,
yeah,
they don't show up not knowing anything
because they've been developing
That's
them
exactly
with the things
right.
that they've been doing
And
to them.
they,
Right.
if that there are daycare centers, and most of those daycare centers don't cost very much, if anything at all. And that's the equity thing. If you can pay $15 and I don't have it, then everybody can come, because we are not going to have any kids in our country who haven't had a chance to be highly educated. They invest the money differently. We invested when we take them to prison.
Right. Yeah.
And they do it on the other end.
Because see, it's funny. It's funny you say that, because my son's a senior now, but some of the things he said to me over the years, I mean, just smart. I remember once in elementary school, he said, "Dad, we're supposed to read 50 books this year." I said, "Okay. What would you give me if I read 100?" Well, wait a minute,
He's
bro.
thinking.
The school's giving you something for doing 50. Why do I have to give you something? But I joined in, and I started to get into that part of it by saying, cool, if you can get 100 books, and I want them all written. I want to see when you finish.
Right. Yeah.
And so they started doing that. That's why I think incentives for schools, especially if they're underperforming, get with this school and get with that school. Give them the necessary resources.
That's right.
Allow those kids to compete with this school and see what we get.
And because and that would be part of the joy of me. I just can't get. I didn't like it when I'd go into my classroom and I couldn't make it joyful for myself. That's important. When you think about how much time you spend in school, it's not that it's going to be a laugh every day, but you can be joyful and still learn, and you will even want to be there.
Right.
And I'll just get, since you're asking what can community do, here's some other things community can do. We have our reading is really low in Arkansas, but it's not just Arkansas. It's kind of the whole country. Except for Massachusetts and those highly unionized states. I'll just put it that way. And the South, of course, is behind so much of the country. But all of the country reading is an issue. And one thing we figured out is we have been using a reading program that has really not been working well for kids over about the last 30 years. Nobody was doing this on purpose, because that was what people thought was a good thing.
It just needs to be updated.
It had to be updated. So and then we start looking at kids who are dyslexic, and kids with dyslexic are not stupid or dumb anything. Their brain is wired differently, where they have to be taught to learn differently. So in 2013, I passed a law that said every school had to start screening, and this is going to make a huge difference for our kids. But the bottom line is the people in the community, when parents don't know, not asking, the people in the community need to be asking these questions. Are we taking care of kids with dyslexia? Because if you don't, they won't be able to read. And then I had passed another law called the right to read, that every kid has a right to learn to read. And that is that now
it seems odd that you have to create a law to say people have the right to read.
That's right. And I called it right to read because I wanted them to know I was serious. But in the law, I pointed out the kind of things that have to happen because I've been studying the brain and how people learn how to read. And the research, it is purely based on research, not something I just made up, because we just know so much more now than we did 30 years ago about how the brain works and how the brain works when you learn how to read. And so in the law, I stipulated how if you're going to school to learn how to teach, you've got to learn how to teach reading according to the way the brain learns.
Right.
If there are kids with dyslexia say, for example, I taught 11th and 12th grade mainly and some 10th graders.
By the way, one of the best schools
at Robinson High School.
Hey, all right.
I'm telling you, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I loved it. I still miss it. But I go out there sometimes now, too. But so if I'm in high school, and I know I taught kids who were dyslexic because I know there was nothing wrong with them as far as being smart, but they had issues reading. And I didn't have the tools because I didn't know about it, but I knew something was going on. It wasn't anything that they couldn't learn. So after all of this, and this has bothered me all these years, so I did the research, did the study, and got with people who knew about it. And so if I am a teacher at that grade, and
you're dealing with it, someone before you is dealing with it.
That's right. That's right. Now I'll know. But if for teachers who are teaching right now, or parents out there, you have a child in the upper grades and they are not reading well, so now what that bill says, I should be taught at least to recognize the markers of dyslexia. Like I was saying, I know there's something about Mark because he's really smart, but blah, blah, blah. And so now I'll be taught I recognize that's dyslexia. Then I can get some help for that person.
Right.
Because when people get help, because nobody wants to not be able to read.
No one.
And when they get help and the right kind of help, they just zoom off the page. It is really pretty fantastic. So people need to be asking their schools, have your school had the RISE training? That's for the Right to Read bill. Have you screened kids and for dyslexia? What are you doing? Are you using programs to be sure they get help? There's no point in screening them if you're not going to help them.
Right.
So, and they're supposed to do that in the kindergarten, first and second grade, all three of those years, Sister Z.
So now I'm hearing of teachers striking.
Yes. Yeah.
How's the strike going to be effective? Because the word is that substitute teachers are going to get paid $180 a day, which is astronomical.
Isn't that something?
You can give the substitute teacher $180 a day. Can't give it to the teachers who are there every day.
And a teacher, a trained teacher who is coming in the first year only makes $189 a day. And so what that basically says is,
I don't value you.
Yeah, that's exactly what it says.
I don't value you at all.
That's right. So number one, I know that the teacher that they really do not want to strike. Because that's I've been through a strike. It's a hard thing to do. So you don't do that. You don't do that lightly.
Unless it's really important.
Yeah, it has to really be bad before somebody does that. But I would invite people, I'm not going to, and you can look at this later, but on my Facebook, I went and I asked teachers, what are the kind of things, what is it that's a problem here that would be enough to cause you to strike? Or just tell me what they are. And it's a list of things, and I put them on Facebook and Twitter as well. But the first thing on that list was, we're really concerned that we have cut back services so much that we have removed, for example, safety officers who used to be at schools every day. They think that's a very concerning, volatile type situation. Not among the kids, because I'm talking elementary schools right now. Not among the kids so much as we don't know what he's there for safety of the kids, but foremost, that's a problem. And some of the wraparound services that they did have been removed and cut back for the kids. And now we get to teachers. And all of this, by the way, happened under the union, who was such a problem. All of this happened under the union.
Wow.
And the teachers have had days cut from their contracts, which means they've lost money. Some people have been let go, but the work was still there, and now some people have more work than they used to have because of that.
And in charter schools, they can put as much work on you as they want to, from what I understand.
Yeah, they can.
Without paying you extra.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Okay.
right. I don't remember all the things that are in that list, but it's a whole list of things, and I'll put them on Facebook. But when I tell people the reason I wanted to do that is I wanted people to be able to see in black and white what the teachers have already given up.
Yeah.
What they've already given up. And all of this was negotiated with the union there anyway. So it's not like the union is just some kind of big obstruction because they participated in this so that the school district
protect the
would be
teachers.
That's right. And so when people say they're just there and the bad teachers just want to remain there, that's not the case because somebody might end up even if you're a bad teacher, you need to be treated correctly. That's why I say bad teachers can be fired. You just have to get in there and make sure they have due process. If you are a person walking down the street, and you may be the most god-awful person there is, but a police officer still can't
just arrest you for walking down the street.
Just because you're bad. And I go, yeah, there's Mark. I know he's an awful person.
Right.
They don't just can't come and just arrest you because you're an awful person. They might think you have done something, and maybe you have.
Due process.
But you got a due process. And that's what people need to think about. It's kind of that kind of thing when they start saying the union is just there to protect bad teachers. But these teachers and by the way, it's not just teachers, it's all of the employees, the bus drivers, the cafeteria folks, and the secretaries, it's everybody. And they don't make a lot and to start with. They haven't had a raise in 4 years. And that's teachers and the rest of employees as well.
And just making an observation, if they're underperforming schools and the teachers, if they go on strike, so you bring in substitutes, you're still going to have underperforming schools.
Yeah.
So if you're the state, you're not fixing the problem by
not.
allowing the strike to happen.
No, you're not. But there are some people, I think there are probably some people who they want people to think that the teachers and the rest of the employees are bad people. And there's some sentiment for believing that we'd love you to go on a strike because that way everybody would hate you for going on strike, and wouldn't like you because you went on strike. But that's all that teachers have left and the rest of the employees. So sometimes you do have to take a stand.
Right.
I don't have a problem with that at all. But in the South, for the longest time, we've been taught, the big man will take care of you, and how's that working out for us? We have
stand up for yourself.
Yeah, you do need to stand up for yourself. Yeah,
I know about that.
Yeah.
Well, I think thanks a lot for coming on. We appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's probably going to be quite a bit of follow up from this interview.
I hope so.
I may invite you back.
That'd be fine. That would be fine because I really am. I will go anywhere somebody invites me because I am determined that people are going to be able to come to Arkansas and say we have world-class education for all kids.
Yeah.
Because it can happen. I know what it looks like. I know what they've done in other countries, and I've studied it all over the world with Democrats and Republicans are working together because we just wanted to see what is it they're doing in Japan, what is it they're doing in Finland and Estonia, and and it's our kids deserve that, and they're going to get it.
And again, just for full disclosure, I actually called Johnny Key, spoke with his communications director, asked him to come on the show. They wanted me to give questions in advance. I mean, which for anybody out there listening, let me tell you why that's. I don't want to say something I want to regret. Let me tell you why you would never want to do that as a reporter or somebody else, because I'm going to put questions down there, and you may have the answers to them. But then I'll have a follow-up question.
That's right.
Or something else will happen, and I'll need. So I don't want to have a conversation with you via email.
Right.
I want you to if you got the juice,
if you got the juice, show up and drink it.
Show up. There you go. I don't want to say something bad, but I mean,
that's why I'm a teacher. I can help you. I saw you on the edge over there, Mark. I saw you.
If you got the savvy to put this together and come out here and put this in front of people, you should have that same savvy to come sit down and tell us why you're doing it.
That's exactly right. Because I feel comfortable and I'm serious. Anybody who wants me to come, I'm willing to come talk about it, because if I can't come and sit down with you and talk about it, I need to be quiet.
Right.
And one of the things about Johnny Key, he is the person who has all the strings more than anybody else in the school district. He has never, ever
sat down
and had a meeting with the community.
Don't want to.
Not want to. And our coalition have been trying to get a meeting with the governor. The governor will not meet with us. And these are the people who are running things in the Little Rock School District. And I don't I don't know who really cares about it other than the way we started out. They have a focus, they have a mission, and they're carrying it out.
If we could get Johnny Key to come, would you guys?
Would you come back with us?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Do sit down for just a conversation with you guys?
Sure, I absolutely would. Because I don't mean it in some kind of bragging way, but I'm comfortable. I know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
I'm comfortable with that. Yeah, I don't know everything.
But you know this.
I know.
Senator Joyce Elliott, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Hey, and if you got questions or if you have comments, please leave them. Make sure you like, subscribe to the page. We'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you. That was good, Mark.
Good. We're gonna probably
Questions.